March 15th, 2026. You are watching this because something happened on Saturday night that most mainstream outlets are still refusing to fully explain. And if you are here, you already sense that the version of this story being handed to you through official channels is incomplete. So let me give you the real one. Because on the night of March 8th, 2026, two of the world's most heavily armed adversaries struck each other's oil infrastructure within the same hour. Not the same day, the same hour. And the weapon Iran chose for its strike was not random. It was a message written in steel and fire, aimed directly at the single facility that keeps Israel's entire economy breathing. If you think this is just another exchange of strikes in a conflict that will eventually wind down, stay with me, because the numbers at the end of this are going to change how you see everything that comes next. Here is what happened. Israel hit oil targets inside Iran for the first time in this war. The IDF announced it had struck fuel infrastructure, supplying both civilian and military consumers, a deliberate framing designed to justify the targeting while leaving room for escalation. The footage that followed was not subtle. Fires broke out at oil depots across Tehran and Al-Borz provinces. Footage from the Chitgar depot on the outskirts of the capital showed a wall of flame visible for kilometers in every direction. CNN geolocated a separate fire near a fuel storage facility in the northeast of the city. By morning, residents across Tehran were reporting something that sounded almost apocalyptic, but was entirely real. Black rain. Actual black rain. Soot from the burning oil had combined with moisture in the atmosphere and was falling as dark water across entire residential neighborhoods. People were photographing it on their phones. Children were being kept inside. And while Tehran was still burning, Iran was already loading its response. The IRGC published its retaliation statement on SEPA News within minutes of the strike. The language was stripped down to its essential meaning. In response to targeting Tehran Refinery, we just targeted Haifa Refinery. That was it. No diplomatic framing, no caveats. A direct, transactional statement of escalation. The weapon system identified in the announcement was the Kheibar Shakan. The strike was formally designated as the 27th wave of Operation True Promise 4. And to understand why that specific missile matters, you need to understand what makes it different from everything Iran was launching a generation ago. The Kheibar Shakan is a third-generation solid-fuel, medium-range ballistic missile operated by the IRGC Aerospace Force. It was first unveiled in February 2022 on the 43rd anniversary of the Iranian Revolution. The name translates directly to Breaker of Kheibar, a deliberate historical reference to the 7th century battle in which Muslim forces overran a fortified settlement near Medina. The ideological weight embedded in that naming choice is not accidental. Iran does not name its weapons casually. The missile is 11.4 meters in length, with a diameter of 0.76 meters. Its launch weight sits between 4.5 and 6.3 tons. The warhead carries approximately 550 kilograms of high explosive. The officially stated range is 1,450 kilometers, sufficient to reach deep into Israeli territory from launch positions in western Iran, though an upgraded version designated Kheibar Shakan 2 reportedly extends that reach to 1,800 kilometers. But range is not the part of this weapon that should concern you most. The part that matters is the fuel. Older Iranian ballistic systems like the Shahab series ran on liquid propellant. Liquid fuel requires hours of exposed preparation on a launch platform, a window of vulnerability so large that satellites, surveillance drones, and signals intelligence operations can locate and destroy the launcher before it ever fires. That vulnerability is precisely how adversaries have historically degraded Iran's missile capabilities. The Kheibar Shakan closed that window permanently. Solid fuel means the missile can sit fully loaded inside a standard 10-axle commercial truck chassis, disguised from the outside as an ordinary civilian cargo vehicle, and be ready to fire within minutes of receiving a launch order. Iranian state sources have stated that preparation time dropped by a factor of 6 compared to predecessor systems. That single engineering decision is the entire reason Iran has sustained 29 separate waves of missile operations across 9 days of war, without running out of functional mobile launchers. You cannot destroy what you cannot locate. You cannot locate what looks identical to a freight truck sitting in a warehouse on the edge of an industrial district. The warhead itself is a maneuverable re-entry vehicle built on a triconic airframe, specifically designed to maintain trajectory stability during aggressive terminal phase course corrections. It carries satellite-aided guidance with the capability to adjust its flight path continuously all the way to the moment of detonation. Terminal velocity estimates vary significantly across different intelligence sources, with some reporting Mach 2 to 3 on final approach, and others placing the figure between Mach 7 and Mach 10. That discrepancy alone is meaningful, because it indicates either deliberate ambiguity being released by Iranian sources to complicate Israeli defense planning, or genuine uncertainty among Western intelligence analysts about the system's actual performance parameters. Either interpretation leads to the same operational conclusion. This missile was specifically engineered to defeat layered air defense architectures of exactly the type Israel has deployed. Now consider what was on the receiving end of it. The Bazan Group oil refinery in Haifa Bay is not just a significant industrial facility. It is the single largest oil processing complex in the entire state of Israel. It occupies 526 acres of land, approximately 2 kilometers from residential neighborhoods. It processes imported crude oil and supplies between 50 and 60% of Israel's total domestic fuel requirements. That includes diesel for transportation, gasoline, kerosene used as jet fuel, and the cooking gas that flows into civilian homes across the country. Israel has only one other functioning refinery, the Paz oil plant in Ashdod, operating at 110,000 barrels per day. If the Bazan complex goes offline for any extended period, there is no domestic alternative capable of compensating for that volume. The gap simply cannot be filled from within Israeli borders. And here is the detail that makes the situation even more precarious. Most outside observers assume Israel's energy security is anchored in its natural gas discoveries in the eastern Mediterranean, the Leviathan and Karish offshore fields that generated enormous economic optimism when they came online. In reality, both of those offshore gas fields were shut down as a precautionary measure when this war began on February 28th. Gas exports to Egypt were halted at approximately the same time. So, when the Kheibar Shakan missiles arrived over Haifa Bay on Saturday night, Israel's energy infrastructure was not operating normally. It was already running in emergency mode before a single warhead reached its target. This was also not the first time this specific facility had been in Iranian crosshairs. During the 12-day war between Israel and Iran in June 2025, the same Bazan complex took a direct hit. 3 employees were killed. The on-site power station that generates both steam and electricity for refinery operations was severely damaged. All facilities were forced to shut down. Bazan reported the damage to the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. Trading in company shares was suspended. The Energy Ministry estimated it would require 2 weeks to restore even basic operations. Pipeline systems, transmission lines, and downstream processing units all sustained damage in that strike. The refinery eventually returned to service, but the vulnerability had been exposed to the entire world, including to IRGC planners who spent the following 9 months studying the damage assessment. When they launched Kheibar Shakan missiles at the exact same coordinates 9 months later, they were not guessing. They were returning to a target with a verified track record of being penetrable. As of the time of this recording, Israeli military sources have neither confirmed nor denied the specific extent of damage from the March 8th strike. That communication pattern mirrors June 2025 exactly, when it took days for the full picture to emerge through stock exchange filings and Energy Ministry assessments. If the damage follows the same trajectory, watch for a quiet Bazan disclosure to the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange within the next 48 to 72 hours. That filing will tell you more than any press conference. The refinery strike is not an isolated event. It is one component of a rapidly expanding energy war that is restructuring the global economy in real time, and most people have not yet grasped the full scale of it. The entire escalation chain began on February 28th, when the United States and Israel launched joint strikes on Iran under an operation named Epic Fury. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed along with family members, senior military commanders, and civilians. More than 2,000 strikes were conducted across at least 26 of Iran's 31 provinces in the opening days alone. As of day 9, the Iranian Red Crescent reported at least 1,332 Iranians killed, including 194 children. In Lebanon, Israeli strikes have killed 123 people and displaced 95,000. 7 American service members have been killed at various positions across the Middle East. A strike on a primary school killed at least 160 people, the vast majority of them schoolgirls between the ages of 7 and 12. UNESCO designated it a grave violation of humanitarian law. Human Rights Watch called for a formal war crimes investigation. Iran's response to all of this has been relentless and methodical. By March 5th, the IRGC reported launching over 500 ballistic and cruise missiles, combined with nearly 2,000 drones since the war began, with 40% directed at Israeli targets and 60% aimed at American positions distributed across the region. The choke point at the center of the global economic dimension of this conflict is the Strait of Hormuz, and what has happened there over the past 9 days is not a disruption, it is a severance. An IRGC commander stated publicly that the strait was closed and that any vessel attempting passage would be set on fire. Tanker traffic collapsed from an average of more than 100 total vessels per day to just 4 on March 1st. 3 of those 4 were flying Iranian flags. By midweek, transit had fallen to near zero for any ship not flagged by Iran or China. More than 150 commercial vessels sat anchored outside the strait, unable or unwilling to attempt the crossing. On March 5th, the IRGC refined its public position. The closure applied specifically to ships linked to the United States, Israel, and Western allied nations. Chinese-owned vessels were transiting without interference. One bulk carrier called the Iron Maiden sailed through while broadcasting the words "China owner" on open maritime channels. A Turkish tanker identified itself as Muslim-owned and Turkish-operated and passed without incident. These are not coincidences. They are a geopolitical signal broadcast openly on public frequencies. 20 million barrels of oil move through that strait every single day. That represents roughly 1/5 of total global supply. 84% of the crude moving through the Hormuz corridor is destined for Asian markets. China, India, Japan, and South Korea, together, account for 69% of all shipments through that channel. Only 4.2 million barrels per day can be rerouted through the 2 existing bypass pipelines, the Saudi East-West line and the UAE's Fujairah pipeline. That leaves approximately 16 million barrels per day effectively at risk if the closure holds. The financial consequences have been immediate and severe. Brent crude surged from around $70 before the war to above $92 by Friday, March 7th, a 27% weekly gain. By Sunday evening, Brent had crossed $100 per barrel for the first time since 2022 and was climbing toward 107. U.S. crude briefly touched 103. Goldman Sachs raised its second quarter oil price forecast by $10 and warned that 5 sustained weeks of Hormuz disruption could push prices significantly higher. American gasoline hit $3.41 per gallon, up 43 cents in a single week. Goldman estimated that traders were already pricing in a $14 per barrel risk premium, based solely on the possibility of continued strait closure. The damage extends far beyond the strait itself. Saudi Arabia intercepted 20 drones targeting Aramco's Kheibar oil field. The Ras Tanura refinery, which processes 550,000 barrels per day, sustained limited damage from interceptor debris. Bahrain's Sitra refinery was targeted. Fujairah port storage in the UAE was struck. Oman's Duqm port took fire. Kuwait halted crude production entirely, reduced refinery throughput, and declared force majeure on all oil exports. 2 people were killed in Saudi Arabia, the first Saudi fatalities of this war. Qatar, the world's largest liquefied natural gas exporter, shut down gas production on March 2nd and declared force majeure on LNG contracts 2 days after that. Qatar's energy minister warned publicly that if fighting continues, every Gulf producer may be compelled to stop exports entirely. His exact phrasing was that this will bring down economies of the world. European natural gas futures surged more than 50% in 48 hours before partially pulling back. Now here is where the political architecture of this conflict begins to fracture in ways that matter. Donald Trump demanded unconditional surrender from Iran and stated the war would continue for a little while, adding that he was not concerned about rising gasoline prices. The White House projected 4 to 6 weeks to accomplish its stated military objectives. When pressed specifically about the closed strait, Trump said it was each ship's individual choice to avoid it, and claimed that Washington had already wiped out Iran's navy. On March 8th, Iran's Assembly of Experts elected Mojtaba Khamenei, the dead supreme leader's own son, as his formal successor. The IRGC and Iran's entire senior leadership structure pledged allegiance immediately and publicly. Trump called the new leader a lightweight and said he would not last long. But the regime did not collapse. The chain of command held without visible disruption. A new supreme leader was installed within 8 days of the assassination of his father, and the missile waves never paused for a single day throughout that transition. Here is the contradiction that nobody in Washington appears willing to address directly. The Washington Post revealed a pre-war assessment from the U.S. National Intelligence Council, concluding that a large-scale military assault on Iran was unlikely to topple the government. The same report described the prospect of Iran's fragmented opposition taking power as an unlikely outcome. Whether that assessment was read, understood, or simply set aside before the strike orders were issued remains an open question that history will eventually answer. What is not an open question is what 9 days of results have produced. 29 waves of retaliation, a new supreme leader formally seated, the IRGC command structure intact and operational, Iranian President Pezeshkian publicly stating that Iran will not capitulate under any circumstances. And the wave tempo itself tells the deeper story. Analysts observed that Iran's ballistic missile launch rate declined between day 1 and day 4, which pointed to either stockpile depletion or deliberate rationing for a longer campaign. But then, waves 25 through 29 arrived in rapid succession, each deploying different weapon systems, including the Kheibar Shakan, the Fatah, the Ahmad, the Khorramshahr 4, and a previously unseen system designated the Etamad. Either Iran possesses deeper reserves than any outside estimate had predicted, or it is burning through its remaining inventory in a calculated final surge. Neither answer should be reassuring to anyone watching this conflict from the outside. Saturday night, both sides struck each other's oil infrastructure within the same hour. The Haifa Refinery, which supplies more than half of Israel's fuel, was hit with precision-guided ballistic missiles for the second time in 9 months. The Strait of Hormuz is functionally closed to Western shipping. Oil has climbed more than 40% since the war began, and has crossed $100 per barrel. Qatar has declared force majeure on global gas contracts. Kuwait has stopped exporting entirely. 7 Americans are dead. Over 1,300 Iranians are dead. A new and untested supreme leader is now seated in Tehran, with full command authority over Iran's nuclear and military apparatus. And not one of the 3 governments driving this conflict, not Washington, not Tehran, not Jerusalem, has defined what an acceptable conclusion to this war even looks like. That is not a conflict with an exit strategy. That is a conflict running entirely on momentum. And momentum, as any student of history will tell you, does not negotiate, does not pause to reassess, and does not stop until something forces it to.